Hi, automotive enthusiasts. Welcome to Octane Origins, where today we dive into one of the most intriguing motorcycles of the modern era, the KTM 390 Duke of 2013. This machine may not have the brute force of a superbike or the prestige of a flagship touring rig, but it represents a shift in how manufacturers and riders began to think about lightweight street fighters. When KTM rolled out the 390 Duke, it wasn't simply another small displacement option meant to ferry beginners around town. It was a statement that even compact motorcycles could offer the thrill, the attitude, and the design language of much larger machines. At first glance, it looked like a scaled-down version of the bigger Duke siblings, with sharp lines, aggressive stance, and that distinctive trellis frame. But behind the styling was a question that mattered to both new and experienced riders. Could a sub-400cc bike really deliver enough excitement to make people forget the stigma of small-capacity motorcycles? The 390 Duke dared to answer that question in ways no competitor at the time was bold enough to try. This story is about more than a spec sheet. It's about how KTM sought to redefine expectations in the entry-level segment and how the 390 Duke became a global symbol of performance you could actually afford. Over the next few chapters of this journey, we'll explore where the idea came from, how it was executed, and what ripples it created across the industry. We'll look at the motorcycle's development, its cultural reception, and its enduring legacy in shaping what riders demand from bikes in this category. Along the way, you'll hear about the decisions that gave it character, the markets that embraced it most strongly, and the ways it challenged long-held assumptions about displacement and desirability. If you've ever wondered why the 390 Duke feels so much bigger than it is, why it carries the reputation of being both approachable and intense, or how it became a springboard for KTM's broader strategy, then you're in the right place. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear picture of how a single motorcycle helped turn the tide for small displacement machines, proving that fun, style, and ambition don't have to come with intimidating size or price. So get ready, because we're about to peel back the layers of the KTM 390 Duke and uncover why the 2013 model deserves a spotlight all its own. This is a story of design daring to outgrow its engine size, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The KTM 390 Duke of 2013 did not arrive in a vacuum. It emerged from a shifting motorcycle landscape where global demand for affordable, stylish, and versatile machines was rising. KTM had already made waves with its off-road pedigree, but entering the street market with force required something clever. Riders were increasingly torn between budget commuters that lacked personality and oversized machines that were too intimidating or expensive. Into that gap came the 390 Duke, wearing sharp orange and black and carrying the swagger of something much bigger than its numbers suggested. Micro story: the Indian partnership. The birth of the 390 Duke is inseparable from KTM's partnership with Bajaj Auto in India. Bajaj, a powerhouse in mass motorcycle production, had both the manufacturing capability and local market understanding that KTM lacked. By joining forces, KTM could design a bike with Austrian precision and produce it at a scale and cost that made sense worldwide. This was not just a collaboration. It was a blueprint for globalization, proving that performance could be democratized without losing authenticity. Context digest: rising demand for compact bikes. Around the early 2010s, markets across Asia and Europe were hungry for mid-capacity machines that could navigate dense traffic but still offer weekend thrills. Riders no longer wanted to choose between dull scooters and intimidating leader bikes. KTM spotted this trend earlier than many, realizing that the sweet spot lay in the 300 to 400cc range, especially with stricter license laws in Europe nudging beginners towards smaller displacements. The design language of the 390 Duke told a story of ambition. Its trellis frame wasn't just functional, it was an aesthetic nod to KTM's larger Dukes. The minimalist bodywork, exposed mechanicals, and sharp angles made the bike feel aggressive. For a new rider, throwing a leg over the 390 felt like stepping into the world of big bikes without the fear of being overwhelmed. That sense of accessibility wrapped in attitude is what made it magnetic. Micro story: the frame that defined it. Lightweight frames had existed before, but KTM's trellis structure brought rigidity and style in one package. The orange-painted skeleton was not hidden away like in many budget bikes. It was celebrated. This choice elevated the bike's visual presence and riding dynamics simultaneously. On twisty roads, the 390 Duke responded like it was on rails, and riders immediately noticed that cornering wasn't just manageable, it was addictive. Reflection bridge. What KTM had built was not just a tool for transport, but a statement of intent. Performance is always central to KTM's DNA, and the 390 Duke did not compromise. Its single-cylinder engine produced around 44 horsepower, which on paper might sound modest compared to bigger bikes. But paired with its low weight, the power-to-weight ratio suddenly placed it in a category of its own. Acceleration felt lively, the top speed was respectable, and every throttle twist reminded riders that small could still be fierce. Context digest. The power gap. Explained. Most entry-level motorcycles at the time produced between 25 to 35 horsepower. The 390 Duke's output might not sound huge today, but in 2013 it towered over rivals in its class. This extra punch made the difference between a bike that merely moved and one that made riders smile every time they cracked open the throttle. The numbers mattered less than the sensation. Spirited, urgent, and unapologetically fun. Micro-story. The weight advantage. One of the Duke's greatest weapons was its sub-350-pound curb weight. For perspective, many competing bikes were 30 to 50 pounds heavier, and that margin changed everything in how the bike handled. Urban maneuvering became effortless, U-turns less intimidating, and lean angles more rewarding. The Duke proved that lightness could translate into confidence, and confidence translated into riders pushing themselves further, faster. The 390 Duke also challenged cultural perceptions of what a small bike was supposed to represent. In markets like the US, small displacement had often been associated with scooters or budget commuters, not stylish performance machines. KTM deliberately framed the 390 Duke differently, portraying it as a legitimate Streetfighter shrunk down for accessibility. That rebranding of displacement categories started to shift mindsets. Reflection bridge. Suddenly, a 373cc single was no longer something to apologize for. It was something to brag about. Context digest. Global positioning. KTM marketed the 390 Duke as a bike for both emerging markets and Western riders. In India, it became a symbol of aspiration, offering local riders a taste of premium motorcycling. In Europe, it fit neatly into license categories and urban needs. In North America, it attracted riders who wanted something stylish and manageable without jumping straight into 600cc or 1000cc territory. This multi-market strategy made the Duke unique among its peers. Micro-story. The styling gamble. KTM's designers knew that looks sell almost as much as performance, so they refused to water down the Duke's aggression. Many small bikes of the era wore conservative lines to keep costs down. The 390 Duke instead looked radical, with angular headlights, bright accents, and muscular proportions. This was a gamble. If riders felt it was too much theater, it could backfire. Instead, the gamble paid off. It became the poster bike for a younger generation who wanted their first machine to look like it belonged in the big leagues. KTM also took a chance with ergonomics. The bike had an upright riding position but aggressive geometry, meaning it could be used daily yet still felt sharp on twisty roads. This balance made it versatile, but it also raised questions about whether it leaned too far toward intensity for true beginners. Safety schools debated whether the Duke was ideal for training, but riders often walked away smitten, hooked by its energy. As the 390 Duke carved its reputation, it raised the bar for the entire small displacement segment. Rivals took notice, and soon other manufacturers began revisiting their entry-level designs, realizing that style and power mattered even at the budget end. The Duke had planted a flag, and competitors would have to respond. That sets us up to look more closely at the ripple effects this bike created, the way it reshaped rider expectations, and how it forced the motorcycle industry to rethink its strategies going forward. The launch of the KTM 390 Duke in 2013 was more than a single model release. It was a spark that triggered reactions across the industry. Manufacturers that once treated the entry-level space as a cost-cutting zone suddenly had to confront a new reality. Riders demanded excitement even at the bottom of the lineup. KTM had made its move, and the ripple effects started to spread. Micro-story. The competitors respond. Honda. Yamaha and Kawasaki had long offered small displacement bikes, but most were conservative in design and modest in performance. After the Duke arrived, we soon saw a surge in sportier offerings like the Yamaha R3 and Kawasaki Z400. These bikes were no coincidence. They were direct responses to KTM proving that lightweight machines could sell if they looked aggressive and rode like bigger bikes. The 390 Duke had forced their hand. Context digest, shifting expectations. Before the Duke, new riders often settled for practical but uninspiring machines. After its debut, expectations changed. Suddenly, first-time buyers wanted something that looked premium, handled sharply, and carried real performance credentials. This shift pressured manufacturers to upgrade quality and styling across the board, redefining what the beginner bike label could mean. KTM's strategy also hinged on cultivating a sense of identity. Riding a 390 Duke wasn't just about transportation. It became a badge of belonging to a culture that valued design, individuality, and boldness. In markets like India, the Duke became aspirational, something young professionals saved for as a mark of personal achievement. In Europe, it became a clever choice for those under licensing restrictions who still wanted genuine thrill. In the US, it appealed to urban riders who were tired of being told small meant boring. Micro-story, the urban playground. In American cities like Los Angeles and New York, early adopters of the 390 Duke discovered how nimble it could be in traffic. Unlike bulkier machines, the Duke slipped through congestion, parked easily, and carried a modern street presence that turned heads. Riders began to see it not just as a stepping stone, but as a practical yet stylish daily companion. That shift in perception made it a cult favorite in places where space and time were precious commodities. Reflection bridge. The Duke was no longer just a product. It had become a movement in how riders thought about size, style, and value. KTM didn't just rely on looks and agility. It supported the Duke with branding that leaned into its Streetfighter identity. Marketing campaigns highlighted its edgy design, emphasizing that it was bred from the same family as much larger Dukes. This messaging told riders, you're not buying the baby version, you're buying into the full DNA of KTM's lineup. That subtle psychological play built loyalty and pride. Context digest, influence beyond motorcycles. The Duke's success also influenced how the industry thought about entry-level cars and scooters. The message was clear. Younger buyers no longer wanted stripped-down appliances. They wanted affordable products with character. The ripple was cultural, not just mechanical. As industries began to understand the growing importance of design-led performance, even at lower price points. Micro-story, the track day surprise. Some riders took their 390 Dukes to track events, expecting little more than practice laps. To their surprise, the lightweight Duke often embarrassed heavier, more powerful bikes in the corners. Though it lacked top-end speed, its agility and braking turned it into a giant slayer on tighter circuits. Stories like these spread through rider communities, enhancing the Duke's legend as a machine that punched above its weight class. The Duke's cultural footprint also tied into changing demographics. With more young riders entering the market in Asia and female riders growing in Western markets, accessibility was key. The Duke offered manageable height, approachable power, and confidence-inspiring handling. It wasn't marketed by compromise, it was marketed by confidence. And that made it resonate with audiences often underserved by traditional big bike culture. Reflection bridge. The result was a global conversation about what a motorcycle should feel like. Not just what it should measure on paper. Micro-story, digital hype, and social media. In 2013, social media platforms were exploding, and the 390 Duke became one of the first small displacement bikes to fully benefit. Pictures of its aggressive design, glowing orange frame, and edgy presence spread rapidly online. Owners loved sharing their rides, and the Duke became a visual icon on Instagram feeds and Facebook groups, creating free marketing momentum that KTM could never have bought outright. KTM's risk-taking didn't come without challenges. Some critics argued that its aggressive power delivery made it less forgiving for brand new riders compared to smoother Japanese competitors. Others pointed out that being built in India rather than Europe raised questions of long-term durability in some markets. Yet despite these critiques, the overwhelming narrative stayed positive, as riders prioritized fun, affordability, and style. Context digest, the learning curve debate. Rider schools debated the Duke's role in training. Was it too sharp, or was it the perfect way to teach respect early? This debate highlighted a larger conversation in motorcycling. Should entry-level machines coddle riders, or should they demand skill and reward effort? The 390 Duke sat firmly in the second camp, teaching lessons quickly and leaving lasting impressions. Microstory, the global sales boom. Sales numbers reflected the strategy's success. In India, it became a runaway hit among aspirational buyers. In Europe, it surged in popularity under licensing laws. In the US, while volumes were smaller, its cult following made it one of KTM's standout products in dealer showrooms. These sales validated KTM's bold gamble on design and performance in a space others treated with caution. The 390 Duke's presence forced the entire motorcycle industry to evolve. Rivals rushed to update styling, improve suspension, and invest in better braking systems, features previously reserved for larger bikes. By raising the floor of what small bikes could be, KTM elevated the standard for the entire segment. As we move forward, the question becomes, what lasting legacy did the 2013 KTM 390 Duke leave behind? And how has its influence continued shaping motorcycles a decade later? That's where the final part of our story takes us. The Ferrari 250 GTO's legacy now extends far beyond the boundaries of racing history or the collector market. It represents a moment in time when engineering genius, human ambition, and cultural symbolism converged in a way that may never be repeated. By the 2010s, the car's reputation as the Holy Grail was no longer just a label from enthusiasts. It was recognized across finance, art, and even mainstream media. Whenever a GTO appeared on the auction block, newspapers from London to New York ran headlines about staggering prices. And even those who knew little about cars understood that this machine carried a significance larger than horsepower or lap times. Microstory. One defining moment came in 2018 when a pristine GTO sold for over $70 million in a private sale, setting a record that stunned the world. The figure wasn't merely about rarity, it was about what the car symbolized to those who could afford it. To own a GTO was to hold proof of victory, beauty, and exclusivity in one package. The buyer wasn't just purchasing a Ferrari. They were purchasing the story of an era, a piece of rolling history that no museum or replica could ever replicate. The world reacted with disbelief, but collectors understood. This was the ultimate convergence of desire and scarcity. Context digest. Financial analysts often compare the GTO to fine art, calling it an alternative asset class. That comparison reflects its transformation from machine to cultural artifact. Unlike a Picasso, however, the GTO still roars to life. Its value isn't just locked in visual admiration, it has kinetic reality. When a GTO's V12 fires up, it bridges worlds, past and present, competition and collection, utility and symbolism. This rare duality makes it a case study in how objects acquire meaning far beyond their original purpose. Microstory. At gatherings like Pebble Beach, when multiple GTOs line up side by side, the sight is almost surreal. Each car carries scars, stories, and provenance, yet together they form a chorus of history. Spectators stand in reverence, snapping photos as though witnessing a sacred relic. The atmosphere feels less like a car show and more like a pilgrimage. For many enthusiasts, these moments are once-in-a-lifetime experiences, where the aura of the GTO can be felt, if not owned. Reflection Bridge. The reverence surrounding the GTO reveals a truth about us as much as about the car. We are drawn to stories that fuse beauty, rarity, and triumph into something tangible. Microstory. Yet the GTO's impact is not just about nostalgia. Designers and engineers today still look back at its lines and proportions for inspiration. Its shape, born from necessity and intuition rather than computer simulations, remains timeless. Supercars and hypercars of the modern era may boast advanced aerodynamics, but few achieve the effortless balance of aggression and elegance that the GTO embodies. The car reminds us that true design is not only about function, but about soul. It continues to whisper lessons to anyone daring to create the next automotive masterpiece. Context digest. Cultural critics often note how the GTO reflects the broader human impulse to mythologize objects. Just as explorers' ships, legendary guitars, or ancient manuscripts become symbols of human endeavor, the GTO stands as a physical record of competition, ambition, and artistry. The fascination is not only about the car itself, but what it represents. The desire to conquer time, to preserve excellence, to possess something that cannot be duplicated. In this way, the GTO transcends automotive culture and becomes a universal story about human longing. Micro story. Owners of GTOs often describe the responsibility of stewardship. They rarely see themselves as simple proprietors. Instead, they feel they are custodians of history. The car's rarity means that every scratch, every restoration decision becomes part of an ongoing narrative. Some keep their cars hidden, while others share them with the public at historic races or exhibitions. This divide between secrecy and display adds another layer of intrigue. Each decision shapes how the world experiences the GTO, and each reinforces its role as more than a machine. It is heritage embodied. Reflection bridge. When we look at the GTO today, we are not only seeing a Ferrari, we are seeing how humanity itself chooses to value achievement, scarcity, and beauty. Micro story. The most enduring image may be of a GTO still racing decades after its prime, driven by an owner unafraid to unleash its power. Crowds cheer as the V12 bellows once more, proof that history is alive and not locked in silence. In that roar is a reminder, the GTO's story was forged in action, not in glass cases. Its survival and continued use are what make it unique among legendary artifacts. It is both relic and warrior, saint and gladiator. That paradox is why it continues to capture imaginations across generations. Context digest. Ultimately, the Ferrari 250 GTO has become a mirror. To billionaires, it reflects ultimate exclusivity. To designers, it reflects timeless craft. To enthusiasts, it reflects the purest expression of racing heritage. To culture at large, it reflects how we assign meaning and value to objects that carry more than material worth. Its story is not just automotive, it is universal. And that is why its place in history feels immovable, even as technology and tastes evolve. And so, as the 250 GTO continues to inspire awe in the 21st century, its legacy challenges us to ask what we will carry forward. Is it the engineering, the beauty, or the spirit of ambition that defines its immortality? The answer perhaps is all three. The KTM 390 Duke of 2013 began as an audacious experiment, but it ended up rewriting expectations across the motorcycle world. From its striking trellis frame to its punchy single-cylinder engine, it carried a message that performance and style were not exclusive to the largest or most expensive machines. The story we've traced today shows how KTM and Bajaj's collaboration created a product that was both globally accessible and emotionally powerful, resonating with new riders, experienced enthusiasts, and entire markets hungry for something fresh. It demonstrated that the so-called entry-level class could hold just as much excitement and cultural weight as any flagship superbike. That is why, even years later, the 2013 390 Duke is remembered as more than a stepping stone. It is remembered as a pioneer. The machine's influence stretched across continents, shaping rider demographics, influencing how competitors approached their designs, and even guiding KTM's own ladder of progression. It became a cultural icon in developing markets, a cult favorite in cities across Europe and the United States, and a constant benchmark for the industry at large. These ripples have not faded. They continue to shape the motorcycles released today, from naked street fighters to adventure tourers built on the same principles of lightweight agility and accessible thrill. For riders, the legacy of the 390 Duke lives in memory and identity. It was a bike that gave confidence, style, and belonging, often becoming the first taste of real freedom on two wheels. It taught lessons in handling and respect and enjoy, and for many it created lifelong loyalty to a brand that dared to be bold when others played it safe. That lasting connection is proof of its success, and a reminder that motorcycles are never just machines. They are stories we carry with us long after the engine stopped turning. So as we close this ride through history, one truth stands clear. The KTM 390 Duke of 2013 did more than carve corners. It carved a new place for small displacement motorcycles in the modern era. It stood up and said that ambition should never be measured only in cubic centimeters, but in the impact a machine leaves behind. Thanks for riding with us on Octane Origins. See you next time, automotive enthusiasts.